Welcome to the Good Stuff Family Podcast. I'm Dawn Kendrick, and I am so glad you're here. This is the place you're going to find genuine inspiration in authentic, vulnerable stories that are distinctly different than anything you'll see in mainstream media. The story that binds all of these together, it's my own testimony. Candid, transparent story of my own journey. Holy shifts, grit, grind, divine design. Stories from a former news reporter with a renewed purpose. Welcome to the family. Hey, Good Stuff family. Welcome to a series that we're doing called In Their Words, and which we're going to be profiling authors who I have become their newest fan. In this case, self-appointed president of the Colleen and Lauren Murphy fan club. They have a book called Murphys Don't Quit. I couldn't read it fast enough. And we started the first chapter last week with Colleen Murphy, my new friend, who I admire so much for so many reasons, such a talented writer with such a story that they wouldn't have scripted and couldn't have scripted through traumatic brain injury. So I'm going to bring her in right now. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. I'm really well. So we'll be doing these at 8 Central now, which is 9. We have a Cleveland audience as well, 9 Eastern. But I just appreciate you joining us each week, and we're going to work our way through this book. I think about my great Aunt Dorothy, who used to read to us when she had Parkinson's, and she loved the guidepost, I think it was, or Reader's Digest.
Oh, yeah. I love Reader's Digest.
Exactly. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm Aunt Dorothy now. I think I am, because I want to read to people. And she would be, awesome. She'd be all emotional. That was me through this book. Awesome. And I'm like, I know, let's have Colleen read it. And I can relive it.
Well, hopefully I don't put anybody to sleep.
No, well, and that is the thing. The older I get too, it does. It helps me fall asleep, like my own bedtime story. But do you want to set it up just briefly? And what we can do is roll this little setup as well that we have now from Tim Ezel, a fantastic reporter here in St. Louis, who told your story on their platform. So I will roll that, but just set us up a little bit, Mama, about the gratitude that you have for having been through the grind.
Sure. So, most people, go through bumps, along the road of life. My bump was just a pretty huge speed bump, but luckily we are on the other side of that now. We still have some bumps, but not as big. But, my daughter was hit by a car and not expected to live. And, that first year was excruciating, but here we are 10 years later, and, she's doing well. And, obviously we still have some issues because her injuries were pretty severe, but we're just so grateful for the community, the people that came out, the journey. If I had to do it all over, yes, I would choose not to have this journey, but this is our lot in life, and we're making the best of it. And without our faith and our friends and strangers, we wouldn't be where we are today. Are you still there?
Oh, can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yeah. I was talking the whole time. You know how many people wish they probably had that mute for me? I muted myself so that
that's funny. I was just like, oh, is she waiting for me to say something? Because this is an awkward pause.
Sorry. No, what I was saying is this is the two of you now on a speaking circuit after having been through what doctors thought would have been maybe a vegetative state, I think at best, with this level of traumatic brain injury. And Lauren has her own business card. Mm-hmm. And she handed that to me at Incarnate Word Academy. We're both alums from IWA here in St. Louis. And for some perspective going into this, and we'll set this up every week because we can't guarantee people saw last week, but this was Lauren, not long before her accident. She was working in LA, and she's on a run, and she is hit by a car. And this is what you, Colleen, when you described last week, that was chapter 1, about having to go to that hospital and feeling like you're walking down the hall in quicksand. And sure enough, this was the beginning of this journey that, like you said, you would not have scripted, but what a pleasure to be able to bring our viewers into your story. So thank you for coming along, and we're going to have her read chapter 2, but let's go ahead and set this up with this great story. Again, this is by Tim Ezel, who is a fantastic, good stuff dude right here in St. Louis, whose background, like mine, is in reporting, but he has a particularly powerful ministry as well, that your story found a place on his platform, and it is so good. So we'll set that up right now.
I'm Colleen Murphy. Thank you so much for having me here, and my mom. So excited to be here today.
6 years ago, what happened, Lauren? You were
hit by a car in Los Angeles.
What Lauren had after she was hit was called a traumatic brain
injury.
So her skull was fractured. The piece they removed is what controls the language center of your brain. So that's why Lauren has some trouble with speech.
I get trouble with speech.
I could feel God in that ICU room. I knew he was there with me. And even though everything pointed to her not surviving, or if she did, being in a semi-vegetative state, I had an overwhelming sense of peace that things were going to be okay. One of Lauren's biggest stumbling blocks for her recovery now is she has a condition that's called aphasia. And aphasia is a communication disorder that makes it hard to understand or speak words.
Now say it. Look at mom and say it.
Murphys don't quit.
Say it again.
Murphys don't quit.
And Lauren's a smart cookie. She has 2 college degrees. You have a bachelor's and a master's degree. So it's very hard for her and very frustrating to know that something as simple as reading and writing is really, really tough for her.
I feel angry and frustrated, and aphasia is so hard.
She doesn't remember any of the rehab time, and Lauren lost about 2 years.
2 years.
2 years of her life. They said she would never regain the strength in her right arm. How's your right arm doing?
Up, down, over.
She walks, she doesn't have like a normal gait like us. One is up a little bit, but you probably wouldn't even notice. And here she is walking in high heels. And
I can run.
Yeah. Our community rallied around her so much after her accident. We had the soccer community. We have our church community. And even people that we didn't know, that it just branched out. And so many people did so many kind things for us that the St. Louis community has just been unreal. Her faith is super strong, and we know, the power of the human spirit and the power of God and the power of prayer. Lauren, on paper, should not have survived this accident.
So God, I have the chills thinking about this.
Yeah. So she survived for a reason.
Never give up. Never give up.
And our family mantra is Murphys don't quit. When we got home, there was over 200 people in our yard, and we stood for a group picture, and behind me was our neighbor that, our old neighbor that Lauren was really close to, and she recognized her. And the night she was home, she said, "I'm happy."
You ready for a run?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's suit up for this.
Yeah.
A lot of people would think after everything you went through that happened while running, that running would be the last thing you want to do. Why do you still enjoy running so much?
I enjoy running a lot.
It's your way of fighting back against it.
Way of fighting back again. I competitively run.
What distances do you like to run?
5K.
5K.
Yeah.
That's your mindset with a lot of things. Like, you're going to get things done.
Exactly.
And your number one priority right now is get your words back.
Get my words, you're right. Get my words back. I had a lot of my medals in my top of my dresser.
What do they mean to you? What are those medals?
Success.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see all the success I've accomplished. Yeah.
You ready to run?
Yeah, I'm ready to run.
Let's do it. Okay.
Go.
I got to keep up with you now. How am I as a running partner? Am I
Yeah,
good?
you're great.
Murphys don't quit.
Woo!
Sorry.
Yeah.
For Pete's sake, we need sponsors so we can get in the budget for someone who can run the audio. You're like, I'm trying to read her lips. No, I was saying I've seen that several times, but every time, hopefully the point is if people are listening or watching the video stream, that you can take inspiration. That's the whole point of our Together We Can, Together We Will. And every time I'm inspired in different ways and I hear different things, and it all comes down to resilience.
So you know what I hear? I hear her
What?
call Tim a Zell girl. At the end.
She said, "Girl," I didn't hear.
She says that's what I hear every time. She says, "Oh yeah, girl." And that's her aphasia. But it's just every time I hear, that's the only thing I hear. That's funny. You'll hear it next
I
time.
didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. But he is so good at tapping into those kind of resilient stories as well. And that's the whole point, that when you can share like this, and I'm laughing and I'm crying and I'm inspired, like that is gold. That's gold. And before we start chapter 2, we're going to have you read it. I want to point out that if you get this book, again, Murphy's Don't Quit by Colleen Murphy, when you get it, there are essentially 4 keys. Is it 4? 5 keys. Show up, find your cheerleader, kindness is free, work hard, and never give up. So if any of those resonates with anyone listening, I encourage you to listen to chapter 2. This one is called I See You.
Yes. All righty. Nurse Crazy Hair explained that Lauren would look very different. She was doing her best to prepare us. As we passed the neuro ICU's nursing station, I could feel all eyes on us. Many of the staff immediately stopped what they were doing and watched us with sorrow and compassion. I sensed that each and every one of them knew that once we walked through the threshold of Lauren's ICU room, our lives would never be the same. Lauren's room was down a long hall, second to last on the left. Nurse Becky was there waiting for us. As I stepped inside, it felt like walking in quicksand. Though only a few steps away from my daughter, it seemed like an eternity before I finally reached her bedside. I hardly recognized her. This battered, bruised, lifeless body couldn't possibly be my Lauren. Wearing a green and purple diamond pattern hospital gown, she was positioned with her head all the way at the very top of the bed. Just below her bottom lip, reaching to her mid-chest area, was a large cervical collar. I didn't know if or when I should touch her. Becky explained to me that the collar was there to keep her still until they were able to confirm with absolute certainty that she did not have any spinal injuries. To me, it looked as if the collar was swallowing her little body whole. There were stark white pillows positioned under each arm, pushing her upper limbs in a downward V shape toward the edge of the bed. The pillows overlapped both sides of her body, making her small torso appear to be half its width. Looking at her this way reminded me of when she was around age 4. Lauren was always a tiny little girl with a mound of thick strawberry blonde curls. Brushing her curls only made them seem to grow larger. It was best to just let them be. Even as an adult, she often commented on how hard it was to tame her mane. Her present state was in cold, stark contrast to those beautiful, bouncy curls. Lauren's head was wrapped in a white bandage. On the right side, a matted mess of blood-stained hair poked out the top. The left side was blood-soaked, and you could see that her head had been shaved. There was dried blood on the inside of her left ear, cascading down her neck. And blue writing on a piece of medical tape, the top of her bandage read, "No bone flap." That was to remind others that she could not have her head positioned on that side due to her missing skull. A sign above her bed broadcast the same reminder, "No bone flap." The areas of her face that remained visible beneath the various pieces of medical equipment were full of bruising. Her beautiful blue eyes were deeply hidden beneath dark purple swollen eyelids. The swelling on her eyes was so bad it looked as if she had 2 golf balls stuffed under her eyelids. Lauren's hands were tied to the bed. Becky explained that it was just a precaution to make sure she didn't try and pull off any of her tubes and or monitors. Her left arm was wrapped with a blood pressure cuff, and both of her legs were wrapped in air compression leg cuffs. Her body was holding onto so much fluid that every inch of her was swollen. Her hands, although perfectly manicured, looked like they belonged to someone else. The only part of her that looked remotely familiar was her nose. Her perfectly shaped, lightly freckled, petite little nose. I tried to center my focus on her nose. I knew she was still in there and she was facing the fight of her life. The right side of her room held several different types of monitors. The lights and numbers on each machine looked complicated and terrifying. She was connected to several pieces of tubing and IVs. Her mouth was in an open position, her top teeth exposed. A green plastic plug was positioned between her teeth to protect the many tubes down her throat, as well as protecting her teeth. Seeing those beautiful white teeth reminded me how often she liked to whiten them. Back in high school, Lauren had once fallen asleep wearing her crest white strips. The next day at school, she had to wear her turtleneck over her mouth as she went from building to building changing classes because it was wintertime and the cold air caused extreme sensitivity. The things she did for beauty always gave me a good laugh, especially because she was already so naturally beautiful. Between her upper lip and nose sat another hard plastic piece that connected two brown pads that rested across her cheekbones, secured by an elastic band wrapped around the back of her head. These pads reminded me of cushioned insoles for high heels, only these pads weren't being used to keep my daughter's, although these pads were being used to keep my daughter alive by connecting her life support machine. Large plastic tubing connected to the tubes in her mouth and veered off into two more tubes resembling a vacuum hose, first forcing air into Lauren's lungs, keeping her with us. I'm sorry, I should really wear reading glasses. I'm too vain to wear them now. Like I really can't read. I just can't see. Large plastic tubing connected to the tubes in her mouth and veered off into two more tubes resembling a vacuum hose, forcing air into her lungs, keeping her with us. I would grow to detest this machine's unnatural rhythm as the sound switched from sending air in and bringing air out. Even as a child, Lauren had an old soul. She was the type of kid that always hung out at the adult table and can follow and jump into adult conversation with great confidence and poise. At 4 years old, her love of press-on nails, clip-on earrings, purses, and plastic high-heel dress-up shoes began to take shape. Lauren was also my little cuddle bug. Even at 4, she would let me scoop her up and carry her around as if she was a toddler. Once Erin was born, she lost her spot as the baby of the family, but she never gave up her spot as my cuddle bug. As an adult, she and Shannon often fought over who would rest her head in my lap and have her scalp scratched. What I wouldn't do to have a chance to lay her head in my lap right now, scratch her head, and tell her everything was going to be okay. There was nowhere I could even touch my daughter without feeling as if I would cause her more pain. I was at a complete loss. All I could do was stand there helpless. The resident on call arrived. I'm sure this is a part of the job that doctors dread. We quickly learned that not all neurosurgeons are warm and fuzzy. This guy was young, tall, and thin with dark hair. He wore navy scrubs and a white lab coat. When he entered Lauren's room, I didn't get that feeling of warmth like I did when I spoke with Dr. Chen, Nurse John, and Nurse Crazy Hair. He was different. As he began to speak, I watched the color immediately drain from my husband's face. His knees were going out. The reality of the situation had just hit him like a freight train. Thankfully, there was a chair nearby to catch him. He slid into the seat and somehow managed to remain upright as the doctor gave us the rest of the bad news. He delivered this news in a matter-of-fact monotone tone. Lauren's ICP's intracranial pressures were in the extremely dangerous zones, and her numbers would be getting worse before they would get better. His next statement was even tougher to hear. If she lives, you are looking at months and months of recovery, possibly years. It wasn't the recovery part that was hard to hear. It was the word if. After that, the resident stood there in silence. It was painfully obvious he didn't know what else to say. As Dave and I tried to process everything we had just learned in the last 10 minutes, he stood there awkwardly. There was so much to take in. The sounds of the machines, the sight of our battered and bruised daughter, the possibility of losing her, not to mention all the unanswered questions that we were too afraid to ask. As the resident eventually turned to leave, he offered us something else to ponder. Your daughter is the sickest patient in the whole hospital. Even after he left, those words lingered in the room for what felt like an eternity. Poor Nurse Becky was stuck being the only one to try to give us a shred of hope. She continued to explain all the monitors and their functions. I don't think I comprehended anything she was trying to tell us, as I was still focused on the eloquent words of Dr. Gloom and Doom. Like, seriously, the sickest person in the whole hospital? I called BS. I wanted to go door to door in this vast complex so I could prove him wrong. It might take me several days and to reach every single patient, but surely there had to be someone who was in worse shape than my kid. Becky stayed with us all night. I took great comfort knowing she was caring for Lauren. She made me feel safe. When Lauren's ICP levels kept spiking, Nurse Becky asked the doctor on call to order a drug called mannitol. This medication is known to aid with swelling. It removes sodium out of the brain. The neuro doctor on call, not the surgeon, another resident, refused Becky's request. He claimed the side effects associated with the severity of Lauren's injury made it too risky. Becky didn't take no for an answer. She went over his head and paged the attending physician. 15 minutes later, Becky was administering mannitol. I watched as Lauren's numbers leveled out. They were still dangerously high, but at least they weren't climbing. It was explained to us early on why the ICP numbers were so important. If her brain continued to swell, there was a good chance her brain would have nowhere to go except towards her spinal column. If that happened, it would cause her brainstem to herniate, and she would be brain dead. The severity of Lauren's injury and brain swelling carried a very high risk of brainstem herniation, so Becky was with her at all times. Lauren was her only patient. Every 15 minutes, Becky would do a neuro check, first checking her pupils. All the prior binge watching of Grey's Anatomy and ER had taught me that if her pupil was blown, she had brainstem herniation. I paid very close attention to Becky's facial expression and body language every time she shone the flashlight in Lauren's eyes. She also checked to see if Lauren would respond to pain. This was done by pinching her in the fatty part next to the armpit. Lauren's body didn't respond on the right side. Pinch after pinch, she lay there motionless. On the left side, Lauren's body would move, but not a normal type of movement. It was more like a reflex, nothing purposeful. These repeated neuro checks were hard to watch. We spent the first night, technically morning, almost catatonic. We were shell-shocked. Nurse John took over for Becky at shift change. He was even more warm and inviting in person. I was happy John was her nurse again. I was standing just outside Lauren's room when I first met Dr. Jay Chen, her brain surgeon. I will never forget his kindness or his words of hope that morning. Right now, I am looking for something positive to give you, he said. I am going to dig really deep. The positives are there. We just have to keep looking for them until we find them. I was thankful for that simple statement. He was telling me things were really bleak, but my time would be better served focusing on the triumphs. Besides, Dave was focusing on the rough stuff enough for both of us. We have always been a good balance. Earlier on the way to the airport, I realized that I forgot to pack my rosary. Lauren's company had been wonderful. Our boss, Matt, had sent me several texts and been in contact with Sam back at home. He made arrangements for an LA-based colleague named Carrie to stay with Lauren after her surgery before we arrived. Carrie also left a rosary for me in Lauren's ICU room. Looking back, I realized how hard it must have been for her to sit with Lauren, a complete stranger, as she was clinging to life by a thread. Not only did Carrie sit with Lauren that first night, she also went to Lauren's hotel room the next day, packed up all of her stuff, and brought it to us at the hospital. Dave went down to the lobby to meet her. I should have gone with him to thank her myself, but I wasn't in any state of mind to greet anyone just yet. Lauren's condition seemed to change every hour. We were asked not to touch her because it might cause sudden changes in her heart rate, blood pressure, and ICP levels. Her brain was so damaged that a simple touch could cause her nervous system too much stress. This condition is common in brain surgery and is called storming. I hated storming. I wasn't able to touch her. I wondered how else she would know I was there. Dave came back upstairs after meeting with Carrie and brought Lauren's purse and suitcase. I immediately unzipped her suitcase, searching for something I could hold of hers that still smelled like her. Unable to touch Lauren, I was desperate for some sort of connection to my daughter. The first thing I noticed was half her clothes still had tags on them, like mother, like daughter. Obviously, you can't go on a trip without a suitcase full of new clothes. Then I came across a pink sweater that I had seen before. Erin had spent her spring break visiting Lauren in New York a few weeks earlier. They sent me a video of the two of them dancing on the long floor mat piano in FAO Schwartz, just like Tom Hanks did in the movie Big. Lauren was wearing that pink sweater and can be heard on the clip saying, "Let's do ballet moves for mom." The video ended with the two of them giggling as they hopped off the keyboard. I wondered if I would ever get to hear her giggle again. I missed the sound of her voice and especially her laugh. That pink sweater became my security blanket. I would spend hour after hour clutching it, crying into its softness, and inhaling the faint smell of Lauren's perfume. Lauren's best friend and roommate, Courtney, arrived on Sunday. When she walked into the room, she brought a much-needed energy. She marched right up to Lauren's bed and said, "Hey, Luce, we need you to wake up." Courtney and Lauren started a blog when they moved to New York. Their blog, Life of the Lucys, had a large following. They blogged about their dates, their jobs, and basically figuring out life in the big city. Lauren was Lucy with the capital L, and Courtney was a Lucy with the capital C. I'm not sure how they started calling each other Lucy, most likely an inside joke, not meant for my ears. Now that we had Lauren's purse, the hospital was able to scan her ID and print off a bracelet with her real name. So long, Trauma Foxtrot 5395. Courtney quickly got a pen and wrote Lucy under Lauren's name. With Lauren's ID now scanned into her chart, it was a really good picture. Staff could see how beautiful Lauren was. Nurse John came in the room and suggested we decorate the room and hang her picture on the wall. He had told us how sad he felt when he saw her picture. It shouldn't matter whether or not your patient is beautiful, but for some reason it made her seem more real. It made her tragedy seem somehow more tragic. Courtney quickly got to work making the ICU room as chic as possible. Our family had always been a bit extra. If Lauren was going to be in the ICU fighting for her life, by God, she'll do it in style. By Monday morning, we were beginning to get a handle on how things worked. There was a team of neurodocs and an entourage of nurse practitioners, residents, and interns that rounded with them every morning. Each week, a different doctor was scheduled. Cedars-Sinai had 3 primary neuro ICU doctors. The week Lauren arrived, it was Dr. Yen who was in charge. Dr. Yen and Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen was a neurosurgeon and Dr. Yen was a neurologist. Admittedly, it was a little confusing. Both Asian, Dr. Chen was American, and Dr. Yen was a first-generation immigrant. Judging by the thickness of his accent, one could only assume Dr. Yen arrived last week. I had to really strain to understand what he was saying. Dr. Yen was also not warm and fuzzy. He made Dr. Gloom and Doom look like Susie Sunshine. After our first experience of Dr. Yen examining Lauren, Nurse John translated for us, not only in clear English, but in layman's terms. Those first few ICU days all blurred together. I was living on Starbucks, chai tea lattes, and very little rest. I would doze off for a few minutes at a time in the uncomfortable vinyl recliner in the corner of the room. Friends and family at home had been working round the clock to secure hotel rooms with donated points and had meals dropped off at the hospital. I didn't even want to go out to the waiting room to look at the food, much less eat it. Everyone kept telling me to eat, but I couldn't. I knew that I couldn't keep anything down. I knew that it was important for me to take care of myself, but my body had been surviving on caffeine mixed with adrenaline for days. I was too afraid Lauren would die if I left the hospital room. If that happened, I would never have been able to forgive myself. Sunday night, there was a prayer service set up for Lauren at her old high school. We were able to join via FaceTime on the iPad. At first, I didn't want to be part of it. My plan was to sit in the background and listen. I did not want to be on camera. I just couldn't face anyone yet, not even my own children. Dave had taken charge of all phone calls, texts, and Facebook messages. I don't know what it was that made me shut down, especially in regard to my own children. My best guess is that if they had asked me hard questions, I wouldn't be able to reassure them that everything was going to be okay. I didn't even know if Lauren would make it through the day. When I heard Dave saying hi to the kids on the iPad, I knew I had to show my face. What kind of mother avoids her own children? And truthfully, it was nice to see their sweet faces. Later, a friend that had been sitting with my kids told me that seeing my face gave her great peace. She had been so heartsick for me. Just seeing my face on the screen for a brief moment gave her comfort. That prayer service was a turning point for my youngest 2 kids. Up until that point, I don't think they were old enough to truly grasp the gravity of our situation. Seeing hundreds of people gathered in prayer for their big sister made it hard to not grasp the seriousness of Lauren's injury. The detective who first notified me of the accident came by the hospital earlier in the week to drop off Lauren's phone. Miraculously, not a scratch on it. Lauren's phone had been the key factor in finding her true identity. Her phone was password protected, so the detective was unable to get to her contact list. But once Lauren started missing work appointments, someone called to look for her. The detective answered the call and was able to then obtain Lauren's emergency contact information from her employer. He also told me he doesn't get brought into traffic cases unless there is a fatality, more evidence that Lauren's life was barely hanging by a thread. Once I had her phone in my possession, I took off the case and found her hotel key and American Express card with her name and company name right on the front. Maybe I should be a detective. On Tuesday afternoon, Courtney turned to me and said, "You stink. Go to the hotel, take a shower, brush your teeth, and change your clothes." Point taken. She assured me she would be with Lauren the whole time, and if anything changed, she would call me. As I walked out of Cedars-Sinai, the sun was blinding. I felt as if I had just emerged from hibernating. I had not been outside the hospital complex since the day we arrived. I had forgotten what fresh air and daylight felt like. While we were at the hotel, Dave called home to check on the kids. I was still avoiding talking to them. I felt like I could barely keep my own head up, much less try to lift the spirits of my little ones. Dave hung up after talking to our youngest, Maggie, and I asked him how she was doing. "Maggie wants to know if Lauren is still pretty," Dave said. We both busted out laughing, the first time we had laughed in close to a week. Lauren currently looked like a cross between Rocky Dennis in the movie Mask and Sinead O'Connor during her tearing up the picture of the Pope era. I asked Dave what he told her. "Yeah, buddy, Lauren is still pretty." We laughed even harder. It was good to know Dave and I hadn't lost our sixth sense of humor. I am sure each one of our kids had a different way to try and process what was going on. To an 11-year-old, knowing her sister was still pretty made her feel more secure. It felt good to shower. The sensation of the hot water against my skin was a much needed comfort. What a change from the cold, sterile hospital room I had been living in over the last several days. I wouldn't allow myself too much time, as I had to get back to the hospital as quickly as possible. I brushed my teeth and hair and then unzipped the bag that I had hastily packed before leaving for the airport. It felt like Friday had been a lifetime ago. Judging by my packed options, it didn't take too much time to realize I would not be dressing to impress. Was my Crest toothpaste shirt seriously the nicest thing I had with me? What was I thinking? I obviously didn't put much thought into packing. Ultimately, I went with a pair of salmon-colored sweatpants and a black V-neck tee. Upon my return to the hospital, Courtney's unfiltered response was, "Oh dear God, you need to burn those pants." She also let us know that Dave's plaid shorts were out of style and he needed to step up his game in regard to hair products. She had been at the hotel earlier in the day and spotted Dave's hair gel, LA Looks Mega Hold, on the sink. Through the insults, I was thankful for some normalcy. She wasn't telling us anything our own daughters, especially Lauren, wouldn't share. I can't hear you.
I have a big heart on that part. I was laughing out loud, like a literal LOL, not just LOL, because that LA Looks Mega Hold. I mean, those little details like that. And, this part I wrote, not just Baha, but like with a lot of A's, Baha, this, I'm going to read it again. "Maggie wants to know if Lauren is still pretty," Dave said. We busted out laughing for the first time. We hadn't laughed in close to a week. "Lauren currently now how descriptive is this?" And the humor again in the darkest part of your life looked like a cross between Rocky Dennis in the movie Mask and Sinead O'Connor during her tearing up the picture of the Pope era. That's very descriptive.
And very true.
And then you asked Dave what I told her. "Yeah, buddy, Lauren is still pretty." And even the real raw stuff, it felt good to shower. It felt good to shower. Like that sentence stood out to me. So for people who are listening, that's the whole point that we're hoping to share. What are you up against? And how do you take the next best step, right? Mama, isn't that kind of the whole point of your whole journey now?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Sure. Yeah, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I mean, it was, they told us that there would be ups and downs, but they didn't tell us how low the downs would go. And I mean, there were some days where, lowest of low and just trying to hang on for just a glimmer of hope. It was tough. It was really, really tough. And you just have to put on a brave face and be strong because you have no other choice, but, in the end, we had a good outcome. wasn't perfect outcome, but it was good. And, Lauren is living life and enjoying life and happy. And that's all that, we want for our kids, whether they're disabled or not. We just want them to be happy.
And so much of what you said resonates, I know, with so many people. We weren't sure. We knew there'd be highs and lows. We weren't sure how low the lows would be. Mama, that is so poignant. And we don't know. That's the
Mhm.
thing. But what we know that I learned throughout my own life, and again, emphasized by your story, is that what we know is that we can keep taking the next best step, whatever that looks like,
For sure.
whatever that looks like.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And I feel like that, in the Bible, when it says he'll be a lamp unto your feet, a light unto your path, it occurs to me, he never said, let me give you a spotlight so you can see all the way into the future. Just here's the lantern. Could you
Yeah.
take the next best step? And then I'll be there with you again. Is that kind of how you feel
Oh,
through
for
all this
sure.
in your faith?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And thank God for my faith. We were always people of faith. And with anybody, there's different points in your life where your faith is a little stronger than not. And thank God, that we had that, and that foundation was always there. And there were times where, obviously, I had doubts, because it was so, so bad. But, I dug deep, and I remember reading something about Mother Teresa after she died. Not that I'm comparing myself to Mother Teresa by any means, but I remember people being surprised by, I think it was her journals or her writings, where she mentioned that there were times that she struggled with faith. And, that gave me great comfort. I thought, okay, if Mother Teresa can struggle with faith, it's okay that I did too. But in the end, God was right there with us. And for whatever reason, I had this overwhelming sense of peace that, what, we're going to get out of this. And, thank God I had that. And and there's good people that don't have faith, but in times of trouble, what do you hang on to? I just think I feel bad for them, because I feel very grateful and lucky that my parents gave me that gift early on to be brought up in faith. And like I said, throughout life, especially those teenage years, it was never on the front of my mind, but thank God that foundation was always there, and it's always there to come back to.
That he meets us where we are. And often in that song, Better Than a Hallelujah, often in the hallelujah, everything's great. We don't meet him as profoundly. And I feel like it's almost like chiseling. Do you feel like that? Like if he is the master artist and we are to be his masterpiece, I feel like it's how in your case, oh, I can't even imagine, not just ow, but what we say, really, God, really? But
Yeah.
look
Why
at
us?
what
Why me? Yeah.
yes, and it's okay. That's our testimony. It's
Mhm.
okay. Say it. Those are
Mhm.
bold, audacious prayers. Why me? Why,
Mhm.
Lord? Right? And
Yeah,
I
for
think it's
sure.
okay. And that's what you, from having been through the fire, um, to borrow the phrase from John O'Leary, our friend,
Mhm.
through the fire that we, isn't there, I think it's called tempering, where the metals that go through fire are the
Mhm.
strongest on the other
Yeah.
side or whatever.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's one thing to stand here and say it, but to hear it from Colleen
Mhm.
Murphy who's been there. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
especially without reading glasses. At one point, I turned on my lights that I had over here so I could see better. I'm like, I just refuse to accept that I'm in my 50s and I need reading glasses. But maybe today was a good reminder, as I can't tell the difference between a comma or a period, that maybe I need to put some reading glasses on.
And we roll with it. Look at me. These are my brand new, supposed to be anti-glare, but I still see it, but I'm just owning it nowadays. Coming
Yeah.
out of 8 layers of makeup every day in broadcast news, I'm
Yeah.
just owning
Well, I
it.
do have one contact that is a reading glass, but it's the lowest, and
Oh,
so I have one of each, but it still obviously isn't helping. So I need to.
we need to get these segments sponsored by some eyeglass company or
Yeah.
some optometrist. um, Kelly, my friend in Cleveland, is watching. Kelly Nelson. She said, "Here, let's put it up. I wouldn't have my daughter if it wasn't for God and faith." Ironically, her beautiful daughter from the inside out is named Faith.
Hey,
There you
wow,
go. Oh, it
love
says it
that.
right there. Yeah, we named her
Yeah,
Faith Nelson.
love
Yeah,
that.
and so this is what I love. This sharing of even the really God moments. This is what what we try so hard to do here on these podcasts is leaning on each other. And for a majority of us, faith guides our steps, as Bob Goff would say, but others not so much. But in your testimony, that's where you met God in the most profound way. So that was chapter 2, y'all. We'll come back next week for chapter 3, but I want to show you 2 quick videos before we head out. So when you were talking about that last that point where you saw your daughters were dancing on that piano, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do have that ingested here. So I want to give our viewers a kind of a taste of this is in an instant what changed.
Yeah, and this was like a month before, because it was her spring break that she went to New York. So this was in March sometime. So just a month before the accident.
So let's watch this, and let's all just agree to say that we will take nothing for granted, that we will stay rooted in gratitude, and we'll take nothing for granted today. Okay, let me find it. I loved it. It just gives such a great look into the spirit of your daughters. Of course, they're your daughters. That it makes you smile, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, for sure.
Because spoiler alert, Lauren, who was always very persistent and very right, she was she doesn't quit.
No,
Here she
no,
is. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
She was almost embarrassing bold sometimes. She knew what she wanted, and she knew how to get it. And, even something simple like when we went to the beauty supply store, she liked this certain nail polish. And when we were paying for it, she's like, "Can I give you my phone number? And when these go on sale, will you call me?" And I'm like, "No, you can't ask these people to call you when they go on sale. That's rude." And the girl's like, "Oh, sure, girl, I got you." And if she wanted something, she would just ask. And she was always nice, but I'm just like, that's not something that's just not in my makeup to be that bold. But, she knew how to get things done.
I have a mentor mama who's not my own mama, but I friends you choose as family, Mama Debbie, who says ad nauseum, the answer's always no if you don't ask. So you go, girl, Lauren, just ask. You'll get that on sale. Get 2 for 1, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Asked. And so now there she has the business card, and you guys are doing speaking circuits. And so we're going to end each one of these chapter reads sessions that we do with the optimism of what can happen when you don't quit, and when you lean into faith, and when you lean onto each other. So you want to set up this video, this commencement speech video we're going to show?
Sure. So so we were selected to be commencement speakers at Fonpon University in 2019. Lauren does speech therapy at Fonpon, and she's an alum at Fonpon. Now, when they asked if we were interested, I'm like, sure, we'll do it, and then when we were chosen, and it was between us and Ozzie Smith, which really made me laugh that they chose us. I think our price was better, which was free at that time, because we were just starting out, but that's okay.
I never knew that. Ozzie Smith.
Yeah.
Come
so
on.
When they told us it was between us, I was like, yeah, well, sorry, Lauren, we tried.
God used your story. He used your story for
when they were like, well, Ozzie doesn't have any connection to Fonpon. I mean, sure, his story is great, but with Lauren being an alum and doing speech therapy there. So once we started practicing, so we had only done like 2 speeches at this point. I mean, we were brand new. And I knew that I had to change the speech. It had to be more about the graduates instead of just telling our story. And now what? And Lauren can't read, so we can't write a speech to where she can read. And at this point, I was doing 75-80% of all of the talking, and Lauren would just interject a little bit. So I knew I had to also get, more of the speaking on Lauren. Like they don't want to hear from me, but Lauren couldn't do it on her own. So we started this, and, I wrote the speech, and we only had 15 minutes to do it. And every time we would do the speech, she would struggle. And then we would tape everything so that we could see what worked, what didn't work, like what jokes fell flat, what worked. And every time, we would listen to it in the car. I just immersed her in it every single day. And, finally, like week 3, I'm like, does any of this sound familiar to you? Because she would remember absolutely nothing. I thought, how in the heck are we going to pull this off? We got to speak in front of 3,000 people. But, that morning, she was skipping, she was thrilled, couldn't wait to get there. I was throwing up, but she was, so excited to do it. And somehow she pulled it off. And the professor that recommended us told me, when I'd shared with her how tough it was while we were practicing, and she's like, if it's perfect, it's not inspirational. And that was the turning point for me, because I knew, you know what, you're right. I want her to be perfect just because I want her to feel good about how she does. But it's not supposed to be perfect. She's missing the language portion of her brain, and even if she wasn't, none of us are perfect. So
Amen.
it went
And I'm
well.
so glad you brought that back again, that point up for whoever's listening. If it's not perfect, it's probably pretty perfect, because
Mhm.
it's our story. Nobody wants someone who stands up and goes, "Oh, life has been so fantastic. Let's eat."
Mhm.
No
Yeah,
one,
for sure.
no speakers are hired for that.
Yeah, that's what Instagram and Facebook, everybody's life is perfect, but that's not
Mm.
real life.
Yeah, yours is real and it's raw and it's genuine. So I want to show that commencement, but it occurs to me, let's just do a quick reminder, okay? She goes from dancing on the piano keys in Chicago to this.
Good job swinging so quick. That was awesome.
Doing good. Keep trying with that right hand. So good, Lauren. Good stretch.
The work that she
Mhm.
put in for the basic things. If y'all are listening, that if you lift a spoon to your mouth today, thank you,
Mhm.
God.
Yeah. She also went from a blonde to a redhead.
Again, hair schmear. Again, enough. The beauty from within didn't change. You see?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, there's so much about this story I love. So let's show this comment. It's 1 minute long, y'all, and then we're going to wrap this up. Again, if you're listening in podcast mode, you can go to thegoodstufffamily.com or to on our YouTube page. We'd love it if you'd subscribe. By the way, The Good Stuff Family by Dawn Kendrick. You can see why this gets me every time.
Obviously, most of you are not going to have a catastrophic injury to deal with like Lauren has. We hope nobody has a catastrophic injury to deal with. But you will meet some roadblocks and some detours. And we hope that you remember this day and remember these lessons that Lauren shared with you might make that road just a little bit smoother. So Lauren, can we recap?
Of course. Number 1, show up. 2, find your cheerleader. 3, kindness is free. 4, work hard. 5, never give up. You got this, class of 2019. You got this. Thank you.
Every time, goosebumps.
Yeah.
Every time.
Pretty cool.
So thank you, Mama Colleen Murphy. Thank you again. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
next Friday. I'm straddling 2 cities, so I have to keep reminding myself it's 8 Central, 9 Eastern for our friends in Cleveland. I want to thank you, and I want to, for people who are listening, we say to see the good in others and be the good for them. And it occurs to me as I watch that again, would you say, Mama, see the good in ourselves and be the
Oh,
good
yeah,
for
for
us?
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Amen. You're so full of so many good nuggets of advice. So thank you for your time. We'll see you back here next week. God
Right.
bless you.
Bye. Thank you.
You are good, good, good. Oh God, you're so good. You are good, good, good. Oh God, you're so good. In all things, at all times.
This has been a Grassroots Good Stuff family production. If you found inspiration here, subscribe and share, if you would, please. And we have big love and gratitude for our social media director. She is Danielle Folk, and she is consistently going above and beyond. Follow her at Farmhouse Storyteller. Hunter Hogan is our editor extraordinaire who connects all the best parts together. TheGoodStuffFamily.com is where you'll find our sponsors and advertisers who we are so grateful for making so much of what we do possible. And find links on how you or your business could make a good stuff story of the future possible. See the good, be the good. That's what we do. How about you? On your mark, get set, let's go.